Hey y'all. So let's get into Colossians chapter 3. We're going to start with the chapter with context as always. So prior to chapters in Colossians emphasized the supremacy of Jesus and the inferiority of worldly teachings. Paul's explanation of Christ as the ultimate authority and the only source of truth is the key to understanding the difference between godly wisdom and worldly deceptions. In this chapter, Paul will apply those early ideas using practical instructions. This application runs through the beginning of chapter 4, which will end with various news about fellow Christian ministers. So let's get into this breakdown in part 1. Paul frequently establishes spiritual concepts as ideas first, then move into applying them. His letter to the Colossians does the same. Chapters 1 and 2 set the stage by showing how the teachings of Christ are superior to all other claims. Oh no. I lost the jar. Okay. Where was I? I lost it. With that established, chapter 3 transitions to practical matters within the church. First, Paul addresses topics related to Christian conduct, Colossians 3, 1 through 17. This begins with a focus on new life believers have in Jesus. Colossians 3, 1 through 4. This focus involves Christian giving attention to godly spiritual ideas rather than sinful earthly ones. Paul uses strong terminology when describing how believers are to remove certain sins from their lives. They are to put to death, spiritually speaking, all earthly sinful desires. Colossians 3, 5 through 11. Paul gives specific examples of sins Christians are meant to avoid, including sexual immorality and slander. Instead of wallowing in sin, Christians are to put on the new self, Colossians 3, 12 through 17, doing all things for the glory of God, Colossians 3, 17. Paul commends positive behaviors which Christians are to imitate. Among these are patience and humility, but the most important is love. Christian love is what allows imperfect, diverse people to be bound together as one spiritual body. This perspective will be renewed later in the chapter, as well when Paul reminds his readers that God is the impartial judge of all men, slave or free. In the later part of this passage, Paul addresses Christian households, including bond servants or slaves, Colossians 3:18 through 4, verse 1. This begins with brief words to wives, Colossians 3:18, followed by husbands, Colossians 3:19. Children and fathers are then addressed, Colossians 3:20 through 21, included in the discussion of Christian households are guidelines for bond servants, Colossians 3:22 through 4:1. They were to be obedient to their masters, Colossians 3:22, working as for the Lord, Colossians 3:23. Chapter 4, verse 1 is actually the end of this discussion. There, Paul specifically warned masters to heed in his instructions. In chapter 3, God is the master. Sorry about that. God is the master in heaven over all mankind, and he expects those who serve as masters to be fair. So let's break this down, part 2. Colossians chapter 3 teaches believers to focus their minds on heavenly things because their true identity is now hidden with Christ, not on earthly desires which are to be put to death. It instructs followers to put on the new self by replacing sinful behaviors like anger, lust, and greed with virtues such as compassion, kindness, humility, and love, ultimately transforming their lives to reflect Christ's character. Now that's good right there. The chapter also provides practical instructions for how believers should live together in their homes and as a community. Okay, so key themes: seeking things above. Since believers have been raised with Christ, they should focus their attention on heavenly matters rather than earthly ones. This is because their new life is now hidden with Christ and God. Number two, putting off the old self. Christians are commanded to actively put to death sinful behaviors like sexual immorality, impurity, malice, slander, and greed, which is considered idolatry. Putting on the new self. As believers, they are to actively replace old habits with new Christ-like virtues. This includes compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, patience, and forgiveness. Number four, the importance of love. Love is presented as the ultimate virtue that binds all the other together in unity. Number five, practical instructions. The chapter provides specific advice for various relationships, including instructions for husbands, wives, parents, children, and bondservants or slaves. And then the last one is the indwelling of Christ. Everything done should be done in the name of the Lord Jesus, and the word of Christ should dwell richly in believers, permeating every aspect of their lives. And that is so true. That's so true. All right, y'all. I'm about to go to bed. That's all I have for the full breakdown of Colossians chapter 3, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.